was trained in art schools to use photography as an art medium. I was never really trained to do anything practical with photography. Applied photography, whether it's reportage or fashion or whatever, is completely uninteresting for me. I think photography as such is not necessarily interesting. It's interesting as an art medium when it can intersect with other aesthetic, social questions.
I never thought of myself as a photographer. I never liked photography very well. I never felt any allegiance to its so-called history. And to this day, I don't really believe that it has a history. I made photographs because photography was the simplest, most direct way of recording something. I worked in photography because it was the most conventional. It was a form of visual notation that has, of course, since been supplanted by other things, by video, whatever. But at that time, it was probably the most simple and, in a certain way, unpretentious way to work. Anyone can take pictures. What's difficult is thinking about them, organizing them, trying to use them, montage them in some way so that some meaning can be constructed out of them. And that's really where the work begins. I was born and was living in the middle of one of the most rapidly urbanizing areas in the world, Southern California in the post-war period. You could watch the changes take place. I mean, it was astonishing what had, and a new world was being born there. Perhaps not a very pleasant world, but one that was simply this new, homogenized American environment that was marching across the land and being exported. And it seemed no one wanted to confront this. It was invisible, and it was invisible in the sense it was simply material that people filtered out. People pretended not to see it. I was looking for the things that were most typical, the things that are the most quotidian, everyday, unremarkable, and trying to represent them in a way that was the most quotidian and everyday and unremarkable. And I certainly wanted my work to look like anyone could do it. I didn't want it to have a style. I wanted it to look as mute and as distant, to appear to be as objective as possible. Of course, it's not objective. I tried very hard in this work not to show my point of view. I tried to think of myself as an anthropologist from a different solar system. Someone coming and simply recording the events that transpired in front of their camera. What I was interested in more was the phenomena of the place, not the thing itself, but the effect of it. The effect of this kind of urbanization, the effect of this kind of living, the effect of this kind of building. What kind of people would come out of this? What kind of new world was being built here? Or was it a world people could live in? Really?
Photography begins with a world that's perhaps overfull and needs to sort out from that world what's meaningful. I think there are a number of ways you can speak about what is the subject of a photograph. And one thing could be a set of issues that are philosophical or social or aesthetic or political. But in the very simplest sense of the word, is what is the camera looking at and why am I looking at that? I looked at it because it was commonplace and ordinary. It was around me everywhere. When I photographed tract houses in Southern California, everyone I knew grew up in a house like that. I grew up in a house like that. This was simply the overwhelmingly dominant mode of residential building in that part of the world. And yet no one seemed to want to look at it. I mean, now everyone talks about this, and it's become very standard, trite subject matter. But at that time, a lot of the world was oddly obscene for photography. That is, it couldn't be portrayed. And I'm not talking about things that involved sexuality or even politics, but there seemed to be a horror of facing the environment that we made for ourselves. I felt, okay, this is the hand that you've dealt me. These are the fruits of mid-period American capitalism that you've given us to, well, look at them. There's not one task for art, there are many tasks. And I can't write off work such as Cy Twombly. I mean, this is work that's about sheer beauty. But this isn't my concern particularly. The world divides between the people who respond to Matisse and the people who respond to Duchamp. I love looking at Matisse, but Duchamp is 1,000 times more interesting. I admire beauty, but as an aesthetic position, I will leave that for others who are better equipped than I am to work in that way. For something to be interesting to me, it needs to engage a number of issues. For me, a work of art is something that's interesting to think about, more than something that's interesting to look at. I'm always asked the question of why there are no people in my photographs. But in fact, in my work, there is so much evidence of human effort. The place for people in my work is the viewer. Without the viewer to complete the experience of a work of art, mine or anyone else's, that work doesn't really exist.